Remains
well, let's
supported.
fix that right now, because it is not illegal to be undocumented. It is not a crime to be undocumented.
But what they're saying is the problem is that they
no,
are.
but I'm just saying we need to put that information out there.
So what does it mean to be undocumented? Is Sunny correct? Is it not illegal to be an undocumented immigrant in the United States? During the June 9, 2025 episode of The View, in the segment titled Co-Hosts React to LA ICE Protests, the question comes up whether being in the United States undocumented also means that you're here illegally. Now here's the full context of the clip so we can be on the same page.
Well, I think he has a strategy here. He is losing support in every area. Inflation, the economy, tariffs, foreign policy. His ratings are dropping
Even
like
on immigration,
like rocks. But there's one catch.
Is it like under 30%?
Current support right now, though, is that 66% of the American public actually thinks it is crime enough to be undocumented. And therefore deported.
That it's criminal to be undocumented?
Yes, it is not. You know how the disagreement was in the beginning? We were told it was going to be violent criminals, and I think everyone at this table would agree. Haul out the violent criminals, fine. But a very important distinction was 60% of the American public, 2/3 of independents, 90% of Republicans, and just a little under half of Democrats think the crime is in being undocumented.
Even if it's a civil offense.
Yes.
Yeah,
so what I'm
true.
saying is a massive amount of this country actually agrees with not how he's doing it, but with what he's doing.
So there's misinformation
I think the
out there.
strategy here is he's leaning into a scene right now, creating a bigger thing, because it is the one thing that he remains supported in.
Let's fix that right now, because it is not illegal to be undocumented. It is not a crime to be undocumented.
But what they're saying is the problem is that they are.
No, but I'm just saying we need to put that information out there. It is a civil infraction.
Now, Sunny is an attorney, and I think she's being a little deceptive here, because from what I read, if you're here undocumented, you are here illegally, with one exception. So to understand how Sunny's wrong, I have to first define a couple of terms. The first term I want to define is undocumented. What does it mean to be undocumented? Now, San Francisco not-for-profit Immigrant Rising defines the term undocumented as either someone who entered the country illegally at an illegal border crossing, if someone who entered with legal status but overstayed, for instance, like overstaying a visa. Also, DACA recipients, people who are here illegally, let's say their parents brought them here when they were a child, and then the government said, we won't deport you if you come out of the shadows. Those people are also considered undocumented. Now, this mirrors the Department of Homeland Security's definition, where it says most unauthorized aliens enter the United States without inspection, that's crossing the border illegally, or were admitted temporarily, or stayed past the date they were required to leave, a visa overstay. So either you crossed the border illegally to get in here, or you came here legally and overstayed your visa. Are those two things illegal? So first, let's start with coming into the country illegally. 8 U.S.C. Section 1325, improper entry by alien. Now, if you try to enter the United States illegally, Section 1 and 2 will cover those instances. And Section 3 covers the instances if you provide false documents to enter the country. Now, for the first offense, it's a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 6 months in jail, and every time you do it again, you can get up to 2 years in jail. The next category are people who came to the United States legally, but overstayed their welcome. Essentially, these are what's known as visa overstays. Now, it is illegal to overstay your visa, and the penalties here are civil, not criminal. This means if you overstay your visa, or if you cross the border illegally to get into the United States, you are here illegally. Now, you may say, well, Nate, isn't there a distinction between criminal and civil? I would respond with yes, but in both cases, you're still here illegally. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're driving down a highway and you're going a little bit over the speed limit. You are technically driving illegally. You can be fined, detained, and if you do it too many times, your license or your privilege to drive could be stopped. But that's a lot different than if you're going 100 miles an hour over the speed limit. That's a criminal violation in most jurisdictions. But no matter if it's a criminal violation or a civil violation, they are both still illegal. So now, with all that in mind, listen to what Sunny says again.
Remains
well, let's fix that right now, because it is not illegal to be undocumented. It is not a crime to be undocumented.
But what they're saying is the problem is that they are.
No, but I'm just saying we need to put that information out there.
So is Sunny being honest? she's essentially saying that unless it's criminal, it's not illegal. Even though she is correct, simply being undocumented doesn't mean it's a criminal offense. But if you're in the United States undocumented, clearly you are here illegally in violation of either civil or criminal law. Now, there's also a second part of this episode I wanted to talk about, which is when Sonny says this.
A long view here is the fact that he is militarizing and deploying the Guard for the purpose of policing Americans' protest activity, right? Our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. And there's a very big, stark demarcation between military troops and law enforcement, public law enforcement, civilian law enforcement.
Right.
And you are an army turned inside to police its citizens can cause chaos, fascism. And so I think that's the way, and civil war. I think that's the way we need to look at it, because deploying the National Guard is supposed to be a last resort. But what this president is doing is that he's saying he's going to deploy them anywhere in this country where there is protest. So that is certainly not a last resort use of military troops. And
so just to lay out Sonny's argument here, she says the use of National Guard should be a last resort only. The current deployment that Trump is using for the LA riots is unjustified, politically motivated. The military's role should not be used in civilian policing or immigration enforcement. She also says this undermines democracy. So, for instance, if crime was up on the subway in New York City and Trump implemented the National Guard, she'd be saying the same thing. Hey, why are you implementing the National Guard for civilian law enforcement, right? Well, you know what? That actually happened. The New York governor, Kathy Hochul, actually employed the military, the National Guard, to the subways because people had a fear of being in a subway. Here is that segment.
After a series of high-profile crimes on New York City subways, right? You deployed hundreds of state police and National Guard troops into the subway system. But since the pandemic, you have done a wonderful job. Overall crime is down in the city.
Yes, it is.
So my question to you is, why now? Why deploy into the subway? And how do you respond to some of your fellow Democrats calling the move theatrics that play into Republican narratives that blue cities are poorly run war zones?
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. My job is to keep people safe. I have to keep, any way I can, I'm going to keep New Yorkers safe. And I'll tell you who does show appreciation for the people out there on the streets. I've been walking the streets. I walk into business. People are just saying, thank you for taking such strong action. Now, you are correct that working with Mayor Adams, since I've been governor, we have driven down crimes. You know, homicides are down about 30%, shootings down about 38%. The subways have been safer, but we had a spike recently, a 45% increase in subway crimes. Because what happened is I needed to do something dramatic and quickly to send a message that you will not get away with committing crimes in our subways. You cannot slash the throat of a conductor. You cannot push someone onto the track, because people will not take the subway if they don't feel safe. That's job number one. So they are not there to harass anybody. I said, I don't like those long guns. They're kind of threatening to stand there. I said, smile at everybody, welcome them to the subway. These are moms and dads. The National Guard are just our citizens who stepped up. So I will do that any day of the week. I take criticism the second I wake up in the morning until I go to bed at night, and I don't care. My job is to protect New Yorkers, and that's one way to do it.
So just so we're clear, Kathy Hochul put the Army, the National Guard, in the subways because people felt that the subways weren't safe. And the View was okay with that. But they're not okay with deploying the National Guard when you got all-out riots and people burning property in Los Angeles. That's not the last resort. The last resort is people just feeling uncomfortable on the subway. This is what it's come to, people. As always, tell me where I'm in the comment section. If you agree with Sonny on both of these points, let me know, write it out. I think when it comes to whether being here undocumented is illegal, I think she's parsing words and being incredibly dishonest with that point. And with this point about the National Guard, it seems like it's okay when a Democrat does it just because people aren't feeling safe. But when President Trump does it, when people are actually not safe, it seems to be a problem. And a federal judge recently ruled that Trump's ordering the National Guard deployed in Los Angeles was a violation of the Constitution. That was stayed. But outside of that, Sonny was not making the legal argument. She was making a moral argument. And I think her moral argument was subject to who was calling out the National Guard. Because as you can see, when it was a Democrat, there wasn't really a problem. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer. I'm out. Peace.